If we do our jobs right as public company CEOs, we actually adopt some of the really positive natures of what it's like to be in a startup. We're like a startup with a ticker symbol. We run with the urgency of a startup and speed and decision, but we also have that extra layer of the same level of care and consideration that a big public company would have to take.
Hi, this is Alastair, and welcome back to the Venture Variety Show. This is the podcast where I talk with founders, investors, and operators about how companies and the stories around them get built. Today, we're talking about AI, aging, and what it really takes to run a public company that behaves more like a startup. My guest is Chia-Lin Simmons. She's CEO of LogicMark. It's a public company that started in the classic I've fallen and I can't get up alert business. She and her team are rebuilding that old model with AI, connected devices, and a focus on preventative care. So let's get into it and say hello to Chia-Lin. Hello, Chia-Lin. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you. It's nice to meet you, Alastair.
Yeah, likewise. Well, give us an introduction. Tell us about yourself and what you focus on and what LogicMark is all about.
Sure. LogicMark is a small public company on the OTC, and we are in the business of what I would call personal safety and security. And so we are in the business stereotypically of what people call the I've fallen and can't get up business, as well as personal safety apps and hardware. So for even the younger set as well.
I've fallen and I can't get up, but that's is that something that belongs to LogicMark? Not
It's not, but
really.
I grew up with that commercial, and that's I think what everybody thinks about the medical alerts business. And in many ways, they're not wrong. It's an old school type of business, and part of the reason why I joined this company is because we have 1 in 4 Americans turning 65 by 2040. That's a quarter of the demographic, and they are not the I've fallen and can't get up types. They are very tech savvy. I think our expectation of the world that we live in today is very highly connected. And so they're not going to put up with that type of technology, but yet pretty much that was what the technology industry was like for this particular business. And so, we came in, took over LogicMark to change that, basically.
What's the backstory of how you became CEO?
Yeah. So, interestingly enough, this company has been around since 2006. And so, when I joined the company in June of 2021 as their pivot CEO, it was still pretty old school, one button, fallen and can't get up type of business, hardware only, good margins, but hasn't really sort of joined the connected world that we live in today. No AI, no IoT. And that was, a problem where I felt like it was lagging. And so the reason why we took over this company is because, like a lot of people, I am a sandwich generation individual. I had aging mother-in-law, aging family members, and I was also taking care of a child myself. And so we were looking for solutions to help our family members. And so, it's typical for a lot of people who are somewhat entrepreneurial to basically say, gosh, there's a problem. And so what can we do to try to solve that problem if we don't see the solution already in sight? And so this was an opportunity to fix what we saw, or myself and my team members that I brought on board when we started to pivot in June of 2021 to say, we live in a world where everybody's kind of like using a Motorola Razr, and how do we become sort of the iPhone game changer in this particular industry? And that's been our mission. And we feel like we've been trying to do all of that, bringing AI, machine learning, IoT connected sort of infrastructure to really radically change how people think about a pretty old school tech.
Yeah, you're setting me up perfectly here, Chia-Lin. This is what interests me in wanting to talk with you is how a company, as you say, a little old school, is transitioning and modern. I suppose is one way of putting it. How has the company begun to? I mean, you referenced it. How have you begun to leverage AI and institute newer modern technologies into the operations?
Yeah, certainly. We really believe in what I call empathetic innovation,
Hmm.
which means that we really spend a lot of time trying to put technology, not just technology at the center, which is, I grew up in Silicon Valley. So this idea of like coming up with like really cool tech and then seeing where the product market fit is. That's really what most people say here. From a empathetic innovation perspective, we really try to say what's the problem that we're trying to solve, who are the humans that are having those issues, and then what are we building to help them. And so AI actually seems like a quite logical way to sort of do this, because if you look at what's happening here, our pivot to bring AI and machine learning, it was born out of problems that we were seeing. First, we actually have a huge, huge amount of people who are turning 65 and over, 25% of population, but yet the people who are available to take care of those individuals are actually less. And so that's both on the professional side, which was, I think at one point, we're really dwindling down to like about 300, we were missing about 300,000 people professionally to do in-home care. Yet 90% of people who are 65 and over want to age at home. And
Hmm.
so we didn't have the sort of infrastructure to do that. So technology actually becomes a really wonderful bridge to do that. But you're talking about one person serving many, many people. So how do you solve that problem of triaging, for example, or better understanding what the needs look like? Secondarily, as well, not to be a geek about it, but the technology infrastructure today for what I call reactive technology, which is doing what we're supposed to be doing best. This idea of like, hey, if you fell, then we're going to get you help as soon as possible, because there's a very real thing called a golden hour, where if you get people help within an hour of an emergency, your health outcome is better, like something like 80% from an emergency room perspective. So our help is, to be better at that reactive technology. And so how do you apply AI to be better? Right. So the first and foremost kind of way to look at it is to say, gosh, how do you use AI to do a multi-sensing experience? Because today, including your iWatch, everybody's using accelerometer. Now, to be a geek, I'm like one data point to identify data issues and whether or not something's a fall. That's why false positives happen so often with iWatches, with PERS devices, medical alert devices, is because you're using one sensor and it's calculating on speed. And so we utilize basically multi-sensors, and then we use AI to basically learn and tailor to you individually. And so, for example, we use two or more sensors and say, hey, so looks like you had a fall. What's going on? And you're like, no, 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 it's 10 o'clock. It's Tuesday. I'm doing yoga, and this is the geolocation. I'm doing yoga. I'm fine. So, okay, you're fine. Then Thursday, this happens. We're like, hey, what's up? So now 2 days. Tuesdays and Thursday yoga class at 10 at a yoga location. So we're like, okay, so there's a Tuesday, Thursday pattern. So the AI then starts to learn and basically say, like, this actually happens habitually. So what have I learned about this individual? And so how do I tailor it so that I don't have more false positives? It's crucial because people don't want to wear these things because they trigger false positives. And so they don't think it works just when they need it the most. So from a reactive technology side, which is how do we get you help when something happens, that's crucial because wearing it is the number one issue.
I'm kind of curious to you know again going back to LogicMark being more of an old school company. What was the process like to kind of reinvent and to add these new technologies in? Was it seamless? Were there bumps on the road?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I mean, the reality is that versus being at a startup, right? There's always pluses and
Right.
minuses in everything you do. I've been a pre-seed all the way to Series D startup as well as public company executive. And there's a little bit of challenge every time and everywhere you go. But what's interesting here, of course, is that you're trying to basically build a new ship where you're on a ship. And so you want to move over to that ship. Well, maybe you're sinking a little bit because, people don't send us in when the company's doing well, like typically, right? You don't become a pivot CEO unless this thing needs pivoting and it's taking on water as a boat. And so you're trying to build a new boat at the same time that you're trying to basically run a business. And so from that respect, I think it's a little bit harder. Our number one client is the largest hospital network in the United States, which is the Veterans Administration hospitals,
Mm.
right? 2,000 plus hospitals and clinics. And so the government, like a lot of people in the healthcare industry, may not always be the first and the foremost to basically adopt new technology. And so from that respect, we have a lot of respect for them. We still run sort of technology infrastructure and technology, but we've done a really good job in trying to get them to adapt new technology because I think there's a very strong interest across the board from so many people to try to get learnings. Because first and foremost, preventative technology, I think, is a crucial sort of aspect of health tech, right? So that's been part of the challenge, which is that, you're coming from an old school industry where you're trying to run a core business in a public eye, mind you, because it's not like being at a startup where, you can always hockey stick for your venture capitalists, right? You have public audits and the shareholders that are public and, all of this is done in front of everybody transparently. And so that's exciting and new. And certainly makes it a little bit less stealth when you're trying to do really cool things. And so you're trying to keep things a
Right.
little bit stealthy. Um, the street doesn't reward stealth, right? Um,
Good point.
venture capital rewards stealth. So from that respect, trying to be stealthy in a public market is always a little more challenging as well. So.
Yeah, you're describing the challenges. I mean, what else is it not as quick as if you were at a startup, do you feel like, because of the compliance, because of the obviously public facing nature of the operations?
I certainly think the public facing nature doesn't help in terms
Mm,
of, I think that the desire when you're a privately held company or venture capital sort of based company is that you can hype and you can hype a lot
yes.
and you can
Right.
hype about things that you think you're going to do, but you don't end up doing. Right. And I think that there's a certain sort of aspect of that being endemic as part of being a venture capitalist. Like if you didn't, venture capital backed company, if you didn't hype, then you're the anomaly. You're not the norm. And if you're a public company executive, your job is to basically be as transparent as possible to the public. And so we are held to a higher standard. So when we talk about the implementation of AI, enterprise level scaling of technology, this isn't like I pull together some code and then I put a sort of sticker on it and like, little gum and say like, yeah, we're going to scale this. And then, you sort of hold on long enough so that like you get your first client and then you're psyched, right? And then now you could build some infrastructure around it. I don't come from that background. And so the VP of engineering that I brought on board, we actually were a venture-backed company from Venrock for connected cars. And so because we were in such a weird, and so we got bought also by a public company. And so we started working with Porsche, Honda, Subaru. Those are big public companies. And so we got our butts kicked by Porsche engineers, right? Nothing like a German engineer to keep you honest. So enterprise level scale from a public company perspective, when your client is the government, you really make sure that, what you're going to do, can actually scale and make sense because they're not in a business of trying to work at startups where, if it doesn't work and it's a beta, then it's okay. And I certainly think that for people who are in the healthcare side of the business, we have a little bit less leeway on beta testing technology
Mm.
unless it's very like soft scale sort of health tech kind of company. We're in the business of keeping people um, healthy and safe, right? So we don't have a lot of beta leeway as well.
What advice would you have to, startups and others out there in health tech or other fields that, what can they learn from a public company CEO such as yourself that they might want to adopt in their management of a startup?
Absolutely. I think, look, if we do our jobs right as public company CEOs, we actually adopt some of the really positive natures of what it's like to be in a startup. I call us we're like a startup with a ticker symbol, right? So we run with the urgency of a startup and speed and decision, but we also have that extra layer of actual, perhaps the right way to put this is level setting and the same level of care and consideration that a big public company would have to take. And so you could still run with the speed of a startup, but put that layer of accountability in, right? And so in part, especially because for people, whether or not it's startups or public companies, running AI projects is the vogue, right? And so people are trying to stick their AI projects and getting it done without actually having and knowing what they're trying to solve. And so my problem, I guess, with startups as a whole is that as investors, myself included as an angel and as a, you know, corporate LP for a company, is that we're looking for really cool projects, and we're looking for really cool tech. But the reality is that um, implementing cool tech without knowing what you're trying to solve, is burning cash. And so when we talk about startups burning cash, it's best that you don't get enamored with the technology as much as you get enamored with the problem that you're solving. And so if I have any advice is that as a public company, I don't have a lot of leeway to um, find a product market fit. My job is to know immediately and really get engrossed with the idea of like, here's a problem I'm solving, and it's a large enough scale problem that is going to get good returns for my investors because I hear from my investors quarterly, if not daily. So,
It's interesting to hear you talk about, the in vogue AI and how hard it is to not get enamored by it. But yet, talk again about what LogicMark is doing. Do you think about the human impact of what it is that you're building?
yeah, every day. I mean, being mission driven and um, actually also making good revenue are not two things that are divorced from each other. They're
Yeah.
in fact things that could actually be together. And I sometimes wonder if people sort of don't think of it that way, but it is actually 100% tied to each other, right? Because the large enough problem that you're trying to solve represents a greater mission. So for us, we actually hear it every day. We get actually responses from family members and people who said, I had a heart attack. Your product helped me get to 911 in a safe manner. My dad, I live in a different state than my dad. And so having this connected device where the app shows me that, oh my gosh, he fell and the next door neighbor was part of my care village. And so we're in a world today which, honestly, there are less people who can take care of from an age perspective, the elderly than we actually have. And so this is actually not so bad here comparatively, but if you look at Asia and Europe, there's a much larger aging demographic. And so the concept of actually what it means to be part of a care village can be radically shifted. We're very nuclear oriented here. And so that means that when we think about family, it's, your kids live near you and you're aging by yourself. But the reality is that a lot of us lived, like my mother-in-law, in a totally different state. So when she fell, my sister-in-law was somewhat close. And so she helped, but we didn't know for 2 weeks that she fell until we talked to her. Shouldn't be like that. Technology should help bring us closer together and to help us better take care of our loved ones and have that connectivity and bridge. There is definitely something that feels very good about being in a health tech company where you feel like you can see the impact almost every day.
Do we know how many people potentially we're talking about, or
Um,
that are aging, or what did you say? There's
it's close
20%
to
are going
one
to
in
be
four,
one in
close
four,
to 25%, 1 in 4 by 2040, and
2040.
90% of people over 50 want to age at home. And
Hmm.
so the deficit is actually professional caretaking, right? So before COVID, there was about 300,000 home care providers that were missing, right? So it's a low paying job. It's typically actually female oriented. It's low paying. And so we actually had a gap problem for professional caretakers, which means that people like you and like me, sandwich generation people, are stepping up in unpaid roles to help our family members. And that becomes very difficult. Like our app allows for multi-people scheduling because we know that this stuff was taking place over text, via email, spreadsheets on a family to sort of figure out like who's on call with mom and dad, what's going to happen. So, it's a very large burden on the sandwich generation. So that gap is huge. And this number, by the way, in the US, the 25 plus, 25-ish% is actually not great, but it's not horrible. When you look at Europe and Asia, I don't have the stats in front of me, but they are much higher. And so that becomes a problem. And then when we look at what's happening now, for example, with, immigration issues, with cost of living issues, and all of those things sort of combined together, we have a fairly female oriented and fairly immigrant oriented in-home care and in-home assistant sort of organization and organizational structure in the US. And so, um, we think that the gap for professional caretaking is even higher. And so when we look at our technology, we see this as an opportunity to provide data in a way that allows one caretaker professionally and maybe to even scale and scope and view and track and help more people than they have been able to do before because I mean that shortage isn't going to go away anytime soon.
No, it's not. And yeah, you mentioned the immigration issues and cost of living and healthcare concerns as well. What that contributes to the cost of care technology, I assume. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like yeah, a lot of things working against you. Final thoughts, Shailin?
Well, I think you said that it works against us, and in fact, ironically, it works
Yeah, go
for
ahead.
us, right? We're assistive technology to help caretakers and those they love. And so we actually see this as a way to augment what is a problem. Again, I go back to the top of the hour when I talk about, my job as I think, an empathetic innovator and CEO is to say, gosh, what are the major problems that we're seeing now, 3 years, 5 years from now? I always call it like my Wayne Gretzky moment. I don't skate to, where the puck is now. I got to skate to where the puck is going. And so I think this is our problem is that we're going to be looking at asymmetry within the caretaking industry. And so, what can technology industries do to help with that for asymmetric sort of data, for asymmetric help and labor? But that's where I think a lot of technology and healthcare technology can really help and step in with that.
Yeah, well, that's great. Good point to end right there. And yeah, amazing. Great to hear about LogicMark and what you're doing. Shailin, thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you for inviting me, Alastair. It's a pleasure to be here.
Hello again, and that was my conversation with Chia-Lin Simmons from LogicMark. I liked her breakdown of AI and what it looks like when the tech is built around real human problems. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit like and subscribe to the Venture Variety Show. Thanks for listening, and see you next time. Bye-bye.